Quadeja Holly Johnson back in the courtroom today, charged with first-degree murder and 5 additional counts in the shooting death of a 31-year-old mother in Chicago's South Loop.
4 days ago, on January 8th, 2026, Quadeja Holly Johnson walked back into that Chicago courtroom, and this time, the man at the center of this entire tragedy finally opened his mouth. Carlos Smith Sr. stood up in court and said something that has everyone asking, wait, if you were just trying to help, why is Romeca Meeks dead? But before we get into what Carlos actually said and why his story isn't adding up for a lot of people, if you're new to shadow crime and you want real updates on cases where the truth seems to keep shifting, do me a favor, hit that like button, smash subscribe, and turn on that bell notification, because this case is far from over and you're going to want to stay updated on every single twist. Let's set the scene here. It's been 4 months since Romeca Meeks was shot and killed on September 8th, 2025, right there in Chicago's South Loop at 9:06 in the morning. 4 months since her 6-year-old son, who's now 7, lost his mother just after she dropped him off at school. 4 months since witnesses say they saw Carlos Smith Sr. put Romeca in a chokehold while his current girlfriend, Quadeja Johnson, grabbed a gun and shot Romeca multiple times in the face. And for 4 months, people have been asking the same question over and over again. Why is only one person sitting in jail? Holly Johnson has been in custody since December 3rd, when she was finally arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Remember, she was initially taken into custody right after the shooting, but they let her go. No charges. Nothing. It took nearly 3 months of community outrage, social media campaigns, and Romeca's family demanding justice before authorities finally arrested Johnson. And even then, people knew something was off because the story didn't make sense. How does one woman end up dead? Multiple witnesses say 2 people were involved in the attack, but only one person gets charged. Johnson's been locked up at Cook County Jail ever since that December arrest. She was 7 weeks pregnant when they took her in, facing first-degree murder charges, and her defense from day one has been self-defense. She's claiming she feared for her life, that she had to protect herself. And you know what's wild? She actually had a stalking no-contact order against Romeca that was granted back in July 2024. The order was never served, meaning Romeca never officially received it. But Johnson's team is using this to paint a picture that Romeca was the aggressor, that Romeca was a threat. But here's where it gets complicated. And I need you to really pay attention to this, because this is where the whole self-defense claim starts to fall apart. Johnson has a valid FYD card and a concealed carry license. She's legally allowed to carry that gun. So when she walked into that first court hearing back in December 4th, her attorney argued that she was within her rights to defend herself. The judge shut that down pretty quickly, though. You know what he said? He basically told her that celebrating in the street after shooting someone, giving fist bumps while a woman bleeds out on the pavement, that's not self-defense. That's something else entirely.
We are learning new details this afternoon about that deadly shooting in the South Loop back in September. A young mother got killed.
Yeah. Quadeja Holly Johnson is accused of shooting Romeca Blackman. Johnson says it was self-defense.
Well, after new charges were filed last week, Johnson was back in court today. Tia Ewing's got more on what happened. Tia.
A lot has happened, Terrence and Sylvia, since we started reporting this story. And this is 20 pages of documents that I had to pour over today. We already reported on the murder charge, but now there are 5 more charges. This court document filed just this week in my hands lays out the defense's argument for why bond consideration should be granted to the 31-year-old pregnant mom. The motion argues that the responsibility to prove the case lies entirely with prosecutors. The defense says the state has not met that burden, pointing out that Johnson has no prior criminal history. She had a license to carry a firearm. Still, the state has said the victim, Romeca Blackman, did not have a gun. Now, let's go through some of the pages of this document. The first few pages outlines why Johnson is claiming self-defense, saying she was protecting herself and her 6-month-old child that was in the car when Blackman, quote, ran up and swung. According to the filing, Blackman repeatedly threatened Johnson through phone calls and text messages. The threats escalated to the point that Blackman allegedly told Johnson's grandmother she intended to kill her. At the time, Johnson was pregnant and, according to her attorney, feared for her life and the safety of her unborn child. They also say an order of protection was granted months before the shooting, though we found one that was never delivered. Now, on the morning of the shooting. That was September 8th. Last year, Johnson was being driven back to her car by her child's father when black men unexpectedly arrived. She had just dropped off her son in that area. Both women have children by the same man. The motion claims black men allegedly blocked Johnson's vehicle, approached her aggressively and said, "I told y'all I was going to catch you." The defense also points out there is no video that captured the shooting and that multiple witnesses gave conflicting statements. In one case, attorneys questioned the credibility of a key witness who was wearing noise-canceling headphones at the time. Johnson's attorneys are asking for her release under home supervision or even electronic monitoring. The 31-year-old pregnant mom remains in custody and is back in court tomorrow at 9 in the morning. Of course, this is a story that we won't stop following. We'll continue to be on top of it. Sylvia?
So Johnson's been denied bond twice now. The first time was back in December, and the courtroom was absolutely packed. Romeca's family and friends showed up wearing pink shirts in her memory. So many people that the judge had to move everyone to a bigger courtroom because they couldn't fit. Can you imagine being Romeca's mother, sitting there watching the woman who killed your daughter try to claim self-defense? Watching her try to walk out of that courtroom while your grandson is at home asking where his mommy is? Now fast forward to January 8th, 2026. Just 4 days ago, Johnson's back in court, but this time there's something different. She's not just facing first-degree murder anymore. She's now charged with first-degree murder and 5 additional counts. We don't know exactly what those 5 additional counts are yet. The details haven't been fully released, but that's a significant escalation. That tells us prosecutors believe they have more evidence, more reasons to hold her accountable beyond just pulling that trigger. Johnson's attorney came prepared this time. They presented evidence that they claim completely contradicts what prosecutors have been saying. We're talking about 911 recordings from that morning, surveillance video from the area. The defense is arguing that when you actually look at this evidence, when you actually listen to those calls and watch that footage, it doesn't match up with the state's version of events. They're also going after the credibility of the state's key witness, saying this person isn't reliable, that their testimony can't be trusted. And Johnson's attorney pushed hard for her release. They argued that she should be let out while this case moves forward, that she's not a flight risk, that she has ties to the community. But here's the thing, and think about this with me for a second. How do you let someone out on bond when witnesses say they saw her pause after the first shot, then keep shooting? When people reported seeing her fist bump someone right after ending a woman's life, the judge wasn't having it. Bond denied. Again, Johnson stays in Cook County Jail. But the real bombshell from that January 8th hearing, that came when Carlos Smith Sr. decided to speak. Now, Carlos is a thread that connects everything in this case. He's the father of Romeca's son, the 7-year-old boy who's now being raised by his grandmother. He's also the father of Johnson's 6-month-old baby. He's the man who was right there that morning when everything went down. And according to prosecutors and multiple witnesses, he wasn't just standing there watching. They say he was actively involved. They say he hit Romeca repeatedly with her own car door. They say he came up from behind and put her in a chokehold, striking her while he had her restrained. And they say that after Romeca broke free from him, that's when Johnson ran to get the gun. So when Carlos stood up in that courtroom and opened his mouth, everyone was listening. And you know what he said? He said, and I'm quoting him directly here, "I'm just tired of the lies and everything of what they said I did. I know for a fact it wasn't true. I didn't headlock it. I didn't beat her with the door. I only tried to defuse the situation." Let that sink in for a moment. Carlos is saying he didn't do any of it. He's saying the witnesses are lying. He's saying prosecutors are lying. He's claiming that he was actually trying to defuse the situation, trying to separate the two women, try and keep things from escalating.
Quadeja Holly Johnson back in the courtroom today, charged with first-degree murder and 5 additional counts in the shooting death of a 31-year-old mother in Chicago's South Loop. Her attorney wants her out while the case is moving forward.
Tia has been following this closely from the start. We heard from the man who has a child with both women, and he was there when this happened.
Yeah, he was there when the shooting happened, and he was there in court today, and he had a lot to say to us after court ended. Carlos Smith, we interviewed him before. He's at the center of a case that has devastated two families. Today, a judge heard arguments over whether the woman accused of pulling the trigger should remain behind bars and ultimately made a decision. Smith shares a child with Romeca Blackman, the 31-year-old mother who was shot and killed, and with Holly Johnson, Quadeja Holly Johnson, the woman now charged in Blackman's death. Prosecutors say Johnson shot Blackman during a confrontation in Chicago's South Loop on September 8th last year. Johnson, who was licensed to carry a firearm, has claimed that she feared for her life. In court today, Johnson's attorney argued for her release, but documents show that motion was denied. The defense outlined evidence they say contradicts the state's version of events, including 911 audio recordings and surveillance video. The defense also challenged the credibility of the state's key witness. We also heard again from Smith, who disputed claims made by prosecutors, including allegations that he fist bumped Johnson after the shooting and physically assaulted the victim seconds before she was killed.
I'm just tired of the lies and everything, what they said I did. I know for a fact it wasn't true. I didn't headlock her. I didn't beat her with the door. I only try to defuse the situation. They keep deflecting away from that. And what I did what they saying I did made it sound harsh, and I didn't do that. So we need justice. We need justice to be served too, the truth. And they keep deflecting from it.
You heard him say that he wants the truth to get out. As for Johnson, she will remain in custody. She is due back in court, I should say, on February 3rd. For a status hearing. And of course, we've been following this from the beginning, and we will continue to follow that hearing as well. Terrence and Sylvia?
But here's what I need you to understand. Carlos went on to say, they keep deflecting away from that, and what they said I did made it sound harsh, and I didn't do that. We need justice. We need justice to be served through the truth, and they just keep deflecting from it. He's literally standing in a courtroom calling for justice while his baby's mother sits in a cell, and the mother of his son is dead, and he's walking around completely free. No charges, no arrest, nothing. Think about the audacity of that for a second. Multiple witnesses told police they saw him assault Romeca. Prosecutors are publicly stating that he fist-bumped Johnson after the shooting. And yet he's standing there in court saying everyone else is lying, that he's a victim of deflection, that his truth isn't being heard. Meanwhile, where's Romeca's truth? Where's her voice in all of this? And this is where the whole thing starts to feel really wrong to a lot of people following this case. If Carlos was really just trying to defuse the situation, why would witnesses say they saw him attacking Romeca? These are people who were at a bus stop that morning, people who had no connection to any of them, people who just happened to be there and saw what went down. Why would they make that up? What would they gain from lying about seeing him hit her with a car door or put her in chokehold? Johnson's attorney is clearly trying to shift focus, trying to make this about self-defense, trying to use those 911 calls and surveillance footage to paint a different picture. But even if we give Johnson the benefit of the doubt for a moment, even if we say, okay, maybe she felt threatened, how does that explain Carlos's role? How does that explain why he's not sitting in a cell right next to her? Romeca had a protective order against Carlos. Let me say that again because it's important. The mother of his child had a protective order against him. That tells you something about their relationship. That tells you she felt unsafe around him. And on the morning she died, according to witnesses, he was physically assaulting her right before she was shot. So how is he calling for justice? How is he the one complaining about lies when his son's mother is gone? Johnson remains locked up. Her next court date is February 3rd, 2026. We'll see if those 5 additional counts get revealed, if the defense's evidence actually holds any weight, if there's going to be a trial, or she'll take a plea deal. But the bigger question that nobody seems to be answering is when, if ever, will Carlos Smith Sr. face any consequences for what happened that morning? Romeca's 7-year-old son is growing up without his mother. He spent Christmas with his grandmother, got presents from a secret Santa, because the community felt so heartbroken for this little boy. He's volunteering at toy drives, trying to spread the kindness his mother taught him, not understanding why she's never coming home. And the man who's supposed to protect him, his own father, might have played a role in why she's gone. So let me ask you something, and I really want you to think about this. When someone stands in court and says they were just trying to defuse a situation, but a woman ends up dead with multiple gunshot wounds to the face, does that story make sense to you? When witnesses say one thing and the person involved says a complete opposite, who do you believe? And here's the question that keeps me up at night. If Carlos really was innocent, if he really was just trying to help, why hasn't he been cooperative enough to help build a case against the person he claims actually committed the crime? Why is he defending himself instead of seeking justice for the mother of his child? When does accountability stop being selective? When do we start asking why two people can allegedly be involved in an attack, but only one faces a judge? Can there ever be real justice when half the story stays untold? These are the questions Romeca's family is asking. These are the questions her son will ask when he's old enough to understand. And these are the questions we all need to keep demanding answers to. This case isn't over. February 3rd is coming up fast, and we'll be watching to see what happens next. If you want to stay updated on every development, every court date, every time someone tries to change their story, you need to subscribe to Shadow Crime. Hit that notification bell, because justice for Romeca means not letting this fade away. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think Carlos should be charged? Do you believe his story about just trying to defuse things? Let's talk about it. I'll see you in the next one.